Yep. Okay, great. Right, be streaming as well on YouTube as well. Evening all. Okay, there has been some amazing games at Tata still, which I've picked out a fun selection, just like last week, because that seemed quite interesting. So let's have a look first at this game in round 8, played on the 21st. Actually, that's quite a recent game. That's actually today, seems to be the 21st, and it was played today. So Nakamura was playing black against Harikrishna. So Harikrishna is 27.06 and Nakamura is 27.89. I think that he's ranked 3 at the moment in the world. So we see e4, and Nakamura plays the Sicilian defense. So we see knight f3, d6, and now an avoidance of like what you consider main line Sicilian defense. But I always thought, you know, that the grandmasters, they don't care about the main lines. They just want an advantage over the opponent. They don't play openings just because they're trodden thoroughly. It's a search for an advantage. So this is also, you know, it's a popular move anyway. I think there's a trend for it to be increasing in popularity, this bishop b5 check. How does black actually respond? Does he want to offer the light square bishop? If you do bishop d7, you know, it has some downsides here. That white might just take that and set up a Rxb5 bind. That's one thing, you know, getting rid of the bishop, which would have been on the same colour as these two pawns, makes the Rxb5 binds, you know, more coherent with the pieces. The dark square bishop is complementary to the pawns on light squares. But here we see actually Nakamura playing knight d7. And now just castles, and that's something quite intriguing and unusual, I thought, after a6 occurred here. White's intention wasn't to give up voluntarily the bishop pair, but to play bishop d3. And I must admit, this reminds me of the Kopak system. Danny Kopak is an international master and a renowned computer scientist. I think he's got a PhD in computer science. I actually played him once and managed to beat him. He's one of the 2 IMs I've ever beaten. But he has this system of putting the bishop like this in the Roy Lopez, this kind of Kopak system set up. And we're going to see that here, that white is borrowing some ideas from the Roy Lopez. In the Roy Lopez, there's a very attractive plan available for white to just build a centre and sort of manoeuvre this knight later to g3 in contact with an attacking square. And actually in this game we see that idea that there's a kind of Roy Lopez type position that we get, because black now plays e5, d4, and it looks for me quite similar now to Roy Lopez ideas. Knight f1. So the knight's usually, you know, either g3 or e3, but e4's under fire here. Rook e8, it goes to g3, bishop f8. So we have now, you know, what could have been from the Roy Lopez, and white actually voluntarily plays d5. I guess here the bishop's already committed to b7, so it's blocking in the bishop. You might consider a downside that, you know, c4 and knight c5 using the dark squares is a small downside. But if black does that, then sometimes white can actually just play on the a file. And there's a famous Fischer-Spassky game where Fischer just piled up his rooks and stuff on the a file and played it for ab if black commits. So everything is with downsides. So black didn't even try c4 here to try for the c5 square. Black played actually g6, which, you know, if this bishop is exchanged off this, we might have dark square weaknesses. And the more skilled the attacking player, the more, you know, that can actually become from a theoretical weakness to actually a practical weakness, the more resourceful your opponent is. Let's see in this game, b3 now actually discourages c4, or at least gives, in fact, also the immediate option of just b4 and a4 later. Knight b6 is played, rook b1. Now, very interesting move, rook b1. What is white actually up to with this? And now black actually does play c4. And the idea of rook b1 is actually revealed here. There's potentially a loose piece on b7. And, you know, it's strange that white actually plays b takes c4, because in theory it's like giving the opponent an easy target, a backward pawn on this semi-open file. So why would white want to do this? There's a very specific reason in this position. That a4 now is targeting that bishop. We can do this and dissolve this isolated pawn. And actually it seems as though with bishop d3 ahead, in fact b5 could be a target quite naturally on this diagonal as well, potentially. And it seems Nakamura is prepared to let this pawn go to try and generate in compensation pressure bearing down on white's queen side. And that's what I find very fascinating about this game. That actually there was a master game recently where an engine came up with that suggestion of sacking a pawn on the queen side rather than trying to defend it. I mean, sometimes it's not defendable, and when I was analysing a similar position, it seemed okay. So is there a downside? White's a pawn up, black's got the queen side pressure, and black wants to try and grab with knight a3 the light square bishop. So we're still ending up with this backward pawn, and you might think intuitively this is good compensation, grabbing this light square bishop here. But on the other hand, the bishop was a bit blocked in. So knight takes, queen takes, we have this backward pawn, knight d7, and that juicy c5 square it would seem to work with. We have bishop e3 now. Now already actually knight c5, I think white can just take, knowing that queen takes we can always take on b7 here. So we see bishop a6, and there's a kind of weakness of the last move. It means now there's an opportunity to use a3, which white seizes, and potentially to use the a file here. So we see bishop b5, and now rook ea1. A bit annoying that white is contesting the a file quite quickly, but white still has this backward pawn on the c file. Rook takes, now rook b8. So has black got sufficient queenside play for the sacrificed pawn? Black is FIDE 2789. Would anyone agree or disagree? If I gave you 20 seconds to evaluate this, at this moment, do you think black's in good shape or not? What do you think here in this particular position? What do you think? Do you prefer white or black? Any ideas? Any opinions? Just an opinion I want to get. Any thoughts? Who would you rather play, white or black? There's something very interesting here. That white has this annoying move in this particular position already, though, rook a7, which he plays. So I personally think white has the edge here because of this very specific move. The problem is for black that if he he doesn't really want to leave a rook gliding across his 7th rank, but if he plays rook b7, there's a forcing move just taking and then c4, and this could be nice to play c4. That backward pawn doesn't seem so bad. This blockade square doesn't seem so bad. Things don't seem so bad here for white. White seems to be just an extra pawn, and this bishop is blocked also by its own structure. So actually Nakamura plays something quite risky in principle. He leaves a rook on the 7th. Well, I know from a recent over the board game, rooks on the 7th can actually be very, very nasty creatures. Rooks on the 7th. You might have specific reasons to allow them, but in general you don't want rooks cutting across your 7th rank. Some horrible disasters could occur. We see here a quiet move as if nothing's up, h3, so white's just making an escape square potentially, or you might consider the use of the h2 squares sometimes. Black plays knight b6, celebrating this pawn as backward, pointing that out quite clearly. Now white plays a move which the many attacking players would like to play. We'd like to weaken these dart squares. We do that by often trading off the bishops. To do that, queen c1 here It's stronger than Queen D2. It seems we would just be running into a fork anyway on Queen D2. So Queen C1 achieves the idea of the bishop H6. We want to get rid of this bishop, and we want to celebrate these dark squares. Black, on the other hand, has got this backward pawn to work with. So we see knight C4 here. There's also a sensitivity issue already that you might think. You might think knight G5 could be dangerous as well. F7 is the target. But here, you know, we don't want to lose the dark square bishop, bishop H6. And now, actually, this is a loose rook. And in principle, we don't actually want loose pieces either. So, and you know, loose rooks, loose pieces generally can fall victim, especially to double attacks. But here, you know, Queen C5 just attacking the loose rook. And this blew me away, this next move. This absolutely blew me away. If you haven't seen this game, it'll be amazing if you could find this move, actually. I'll give you 20 seconds. White play here. What does white play in this position? Now, if you want to play chess, please move away from the notation tab. Go on to a different tab, like, not... I don't know, just hide the notation if there's an option. I'm sorry I don't know exactly as a viewer how to hide the notation. But try and work it out, you know, why this move is so powerful, this next move. So can you guess what white plays in this position? No, I'll just give you a clue, by the way. It's not rook A2, Michelle. It's not rook A2. It's not bishop takes bishop. As a coincidence, well, mild coincidence, maybe tenuous connection to this, I reordered a fantastic book from my youth called Play Better Chess by Leonard Barden. And it had in this book by Leonard Barden, you know, common winning methods with white. And actually one of the common winning methods was to get a wedge pawn on F6. Now there's no chance of getting a wedge pawn on F6, but there is a chance of getting something quite interesting instead on F6 here. That's another clue. What can we get on F6? That's the clue. Oh, it's such a beautiful move. I just can't believe it, really. I can't believe this resource exists. I put it through an engine, and lo and behold, the engines absolutely love it as well. Knight H5. Amazing. It's amazing. I didn't really see what on earth was the point initially when I checked this out. The point is, if Queen takes A7, can you guess what white has in this position? What's the strongest move here? At this juncture, you can either gain 200 points or lose 200 points, depending on the move you're suggesting in this position. White to play, what would you play in this position? 20 seconds again. Lose 200 points if you say bishop takes f8. Lose 200 points, I say. No. No. Pinpoint accuracy is required here. Yeah, you force the king to h8 first with the check. The king must go to h8, right? Now we take on h6. So for example, if rook takes, we're just mating black. Look at that knight on f6 with the queen. No defense. The check here is harmless. Black's best would be in this position from the engine point of view, knight e3, just to try and interrupt the queen, going to h6. It doesn't really matter here. We can just play bishop takes d6. It's crushing. We're a piece up. It's harmless. It's end of game. So Nakamura cannot. This is an amazing tactic. He cannot take the rook. Staggering. And this shows the importance of king safety. You know, even if you're a 2800 player, you can be hacked. That's a beautiful thing about chess to celebrate, that he's underestimated knight h5. He wouldn't, if he had seen this, he wouldn't have gone to this position. It's just so dangerous. It's so absolutely dangerous. We have this cutting rook on the 7th here, which is assisting this tactic. If g takes, then queen g5 check. King here, queen f6, and we see the role of the rook on the 7th. Hitting f7, we just take here. And then, you know, we mate. So, in the game, Nakamura chose bishop g7. That was his defensive try. We see bishop takes g7. The queen is given the h6 square to work with again. And we're just going to play bishop f6 and we're going to mate on g7. So, queen takes, queen h6. Now we just need bishop f6. Or even here, bishop e5, because the knight's already supporting g7 as well. Nakamura tries f5, lateral defense. But now, just knight g5 is played and we're going to mate on h7. The knights stop the king using f7. If, you know, what does black do actually here? So h7 is threatened and the king can't run. That's it. That's it. Nakamura resigned. A strange game. I find this game intriguing. Very. Because who would expect this? Who, in their right mind, when looking at the logic of this game, if we just rewind, it looks as though White's a positional player and he's playing moves here like rook b1. Who would have considered this amazing mating attack later? Amazing. The way this is played earlier on, this rook, you know, playing a profound role actually on the 7th rank later. So anyway, so that was one incredible game I wanted to show you. Let's go on to another. Caruana against Rapport. Apparently Rapport, I don't know if it's pronounced Rapport. I would have said Rapport, you know, like French. Rapport, you know, you have an excellent rapport with someone. Anyway, apparently it's Rapport. I've heard someone else say it. So Caruana playing against Rapport, who's playing very interesting chess, very interesting openings. So here he tries the French defense, something which cost me loads of games last season. I vowed never to play again, ever in my life, to play the French defense in a long game. I don't want to play it. I don't want to risk it getting cramped. It's just my mood at the moment. I'm doing well with Sicilians. But anyway, that aside, let's carry on. D takes e4. At least he's freeing up the game. He's exchanging pawns. He's not allowing the winner. He's taking here. Knight takes. Knight to f6. Now, okay. White plays knight takes f6. Check. Does the queen really want to be on f6 here? If queen takes f6, we're running into nasty stuff like this, potentially. Black actually played the more dynamic g takes f6. So we have structure versus piece activity with this. It's a statement. We accept the double pawns, but we might have some g-file pressure later. Also, it does support potential e5 as well at some point. So knight f3, knight c6, another unusual looking move. Doesn't this just run into potentially a pin? What is black up to? Bishop f4 is played, as though tempting black to try e5, and that is played. And now instead of taking, white actually just retreats. The damage has been done a little bit already in playing e5 with this structure. We've got potentially looser light squares and an isolated pawn here. This structure is a bit more fixed. Bishop g4. Now with this in mind, if you consider that this light square in particular has been loosened a bit, you don't really want to compound things by giving up your light square bishop generally. But black is playing a very dynamic game, so bishop b5, queen d6. And now c3 supporting, not only supporting d4, but it also gives some options like queen a4, which could be annoying for black. e4, and this basically does swap the knight for the bishop, because white now plays h3. I should have really checked this out earlier. Sorry, bishop h5, but maybe g4 here is possible. So black actually played e takes, and we have this basically an exchange of the bishop for the knight. So if white's regaining this pawn now, he'll have that valuable asset, you know, that f5 square without any light square bishop. You'd think in principle, has black broken some sort of rule here? So knight e7, defending f5 at the moment. Queen f3. So we're going to get this pawn. And actually, it looks as though white's in great shape here. Black castles, queenside. Rook takes g2. Knight d5. But now look, this light square bishop is putting pressure on the diagonal, bishop e4. Okay, so king goes to b8, because if we take here, then white can insert bishop takes b7 check, and then take here, and then that's too dangerous. So we avoid this check. Black plays king b8, but still, in principle, this light square bishop is quite a good asset in this position. Black has got a worse structure, but bishop d2. Why not? Sorry, there's a question. h2 is covered by the rook at the moment, by the way. Knight b6, as though the knight's interested in knight c4. But is it tempting just to take here, or is the bishop going to be trapped? Well, white didn't think his bishop would be trapped. He just did take that. So what is this pawn sack about? Knight c4. Bishop f4 gaining a tempo on the queen. Queen b6, double attacking. But the queen is not going to be taking on b2, because white now plays bishop e4. If the queen dares to take now on b2, then we have rook b1. So if the knight takes, we'd run into a nasty pin. Potentially, I think. Rook b1. I don't, protected by the bishop, I think. That's possible. But so black is not getting the pawn back immediately. Black played rook e8, pinning the bishop. That's unpinned with king f1. So black's a pawn down. White has the bishop pair. And the bishops seem actually quite healthy here in this position. Controlling b1 critically for that rook b1. h5. What is black trying to do here? He's losing another pawn. He's trying to play dynamically. He's trying to weaken white on the dark squares, actually, because he's playing now bishop h6 at the cost of another pawn. b3. Knight d2 check. So forcing white, because of that fork, to take on d2. Bishop takes d2. Rook d1. We're 2 pawns up, aren't we? 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're 2 pawns up. Is white's position a little bit more difficult? It's opposite coloured bishops. Does that give black some salvation here? Opposite coloured bishops. Well, white actually plays bishop c6, forcing move. And actually he's going to protect the bishop now with tempo with d5. Rook e5. And now a very, very powerful, nifty move here, which really helps clarify things, how dangerous they are for black. Very, very quickly, what does white play in this position if I give you 20 seconds here? Beautiful move. So 20 seconds, white's play. What does white play in this position? Any ideas? if you give black time, black might actually be taking the H pawn here one day, but it's difficult even to move that bishop at the moment. But maybe, you know, something like this, you know, we don't want to give black too much time to win that H pawn. So what would you do here with white? White play. Okay. White's play. Is this chat's still working over here? Okay, not rook takes g5. No, rook g4. It threatens actually. Well done if you saw this. You know, rook b4. Pretty direct threat. Doesn't matter about h5 at the moment. We've got rook b4 on the cards. Our queen's controlling h1 as well. There's no naughty tricks with h1. So a5 to stop rook b4. And now rook a4, protecting the pawn, by the way, again. And now white also carries this threat of b4 and mating on a8, if that's possible. Queen c5, and I think here b4 was actually possible when I engine checked this game. But white actually chose a different move at move 31, rook dd4. Still very, very dangerous for black. Black plays rook. There's nothing fast that black can do here. White's controlling all the key squares. Black tries rook g8. And now b4 does seem entirely possible, but instead queen d3, just with the idea of queen a6. And like the previous game, it's like this unbreakable mating net is being woven around the king here with queen a6. You know, what does black do about this? Black resigned here. If we go with queen b6, or black resigned, if queen b6, I think just b4 is actually very strong. I suspect b4 is very strong. Just take here, and you know, but I don't think we necessarily want to. We might even be able to give up 2 rooks for the queen and make black, but I think simply b4. Black is 2 pawns down here without any counterplay in sight. Okay, so that was an interesting game. Let's go on to other. Wesley So started off the tournament strong from the Philippines, and let's see how he did against Perez. So he was playing black against Domingo Perez, 2754, slightly higher rated than Wesley So, 2719. And this is quite an interesting game. E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6, which is you know, it's meant to be very, very solid defense. Petrov, I think. So knight takes E5, D6, knight F3, knight takes, and this trendy new move, you know, trying to keep some excitement in the position, knight C3. It's a sort of move I love personally, especially in, well, in blitz, in long games, because we're changing the pawn structure. We're compromising our own pawn structure, but we're getting some dynamic possibilities here of castling queenside, which is the fun of chess. You know, when you get opposite side castling, it makes for much more entertaining games. So what used to be a boring defense is quite interesting all of a sudden with this variation. But Akobian in the recent team Olympiad managed to win with black. And let's see, so queen d2, b6, white castles queenside. So they've got this situation, the opposite side castling. It adds a lot of fun to the position. Bishop b7. And I think the main move here is actually knight d4. It's actually, this h4 is, as played, looks entirely logical, but apparently is rarer than knight d4. I think the Akobian game was knight d4, if it was similar to this. Knight d7, bishop d3, knight f6. And I thought this was quite a funny thing that happened now. Bishop d4, as though white is really very keen on weakening h7, giving up this bishop, giving up the bishop pair just to weaken h7 potentially. And black prompts this with c5, saying take my bishop, and white does take my knight, pardon me, and white does take the knight. Bishop takes knight, bishop takes knight on f6. queen f4. So black's got the bishop pair. Is this attack going anywhere? Is it dangerous? You might factor in some other things here, but immediately also knight g5 needs to be checked out all the time. Black plays d5, and white actually doesn't play knight g5. This I think can be defended somehow. Knight g5 wasn't played. Maybe just h6. But anyway, that wasn't played. Actually, white plays h5, and this is really quite interesting. Now h5 is potentially making queen f5 more dangerous, because it means that any g6 we can hg and we're opening up this rook. So we see Wesley So trying to play rook e8, and now here I think black can just about get away with g6 to queen f5, but white doesn't actually do that. White plays g4, and here I think is one of the key mistakes, apparently from an engine point of view anyway, in this game, that actually black should consider trying to suppress white from playing g5, and the way to do that technically here is to play d4, so that anytime g5 is played, black can take on f6, and this might actually be an okay position for black, apparently. But so that was an opportunity to play d4, apparently, to try and discourage g5. But this next move, it looked as though black thought that the fianchetto bishop was sufficient defensive resource here, and black can fianchetto the bishop with g6, to try and put the bishop on g7. So does it matter about this, h file? Well, we're going to see hg hg g5, and the bishop goes to g7. So surely we've got this lovely defensive bishop. Nothing can go wrong, can it? Can it? White's play here. White's play, and this is game again. It apparently is played today. So white's play. If I give you 20 seconds, what would you play in this position, starting from now? Can you see a major attacking resource? Any ideas? How would you proceed this attack here? I'm going to give you a clue, actually. I'm going to give you a clue. Often statistically, the fianchetto bishop is a nice defender. So we want to try and get it off and have the option of taking it off. And actually, it's the amazing looking move, rook h7. So we're actually threatening to get rid of that key defender. And the problem is for black that if king takes, then we have queen takes f7. And this h file is just terrible. There's not enough time for this d4 to stop rook h1. This is hopeless. We've got this nasty pin and this rook h1 to execute black. This is not checked. The knight's defending it. No defense. No defense. So Wesley, so he's in trouble. He can't take that. We see d4, and this kind of weakens this diagonal, and that's pounced on immediately now by bishop c4. So threatening, queen takes and then mating here. So black defends f7. And this is a really, really fantastic, fantastically deep and shocking move, not for the reasons you might think. So white to play here, wonderful. If you can remember this template, this is how to destroy a fianchetto bishop king position. It's amazing, amazing. White to play 20 seconds here. If you can find the reasons for this, that's even more amazing, not just the move. So what would you play in this position? So white to play, such a crushing idea. Beautiful idea, I've got to say. It's amazing the how to attack kings tells of the unexpected here. You think this next move is virtually impossible. There's actually two moves with the same effect. Alright, okay, I'm going to show you the move and I'm going to tell you why a lot of people would not think this is possible. It would be ruled out. The move is just to put the queen on the H file, but most people would rule this out here because the bishop takes f3, because it does stop the use of h1. I'm just winning a piece, it stops the use of h1. But it turns out something really horrible here. White doesn't even need to use this rook, believe it or not. It's this pawn which is the killer. The pawn on g5 is the killer in this position. And I'm going to show you. Rook takes g7. King takes check, forcing king g8, right? We use the pin, queen takes g6. We force the king back to g8, and we play g6. Wow. Without using the rook, we're just going to mate with this guy. Also got bishop f7, I think, winning the queen. So I think, what was the score sheet? I'm just checking the score sheet. So I think I've run ahead myself. No, it was here that black resigned. So that was the idea. So it just shows you, I used to have this generalization that the fianchetto bishops were enough to defend. So here, it's clear that they have some issues when you're giving your opponent this theoretical risk factor, this H file. And you might think, well, hold on a sec, couldn't black have taken with the F pawn earlier? Let's have a quick look at that as well. Why didn't black take with the F pawn? I suspect it's still pretty dangerous with the problem I think we've taken with the F pawn. I'll put foot in mouth here. Maybe g5 is still strong here. I shouldn't have mentioned this. I'm pretty sure white's got a strong attack in this position. Maybe with g5. Yeah, put it through your engines. I'll give you the PGN when I upload to YouTube. It's a good position for analysis, but it seems Wesley so decided that HG was the way to go. So FG, I think must fail here. It looks too dangerous, but I can't be sure exactly how without checking here. I think G5 is pretty dangerous looking, though, as things go. I mean, maybe, for example, let's try and give an example. Rook H7, you know, we get the same sort of pattern, you know, on the H file. That bishop hasn't got any scope at the moment, so it's quite a dangerous position anyway. So let's have a look at another game. I'm sorry to pick on Wesley, but let's have a look at another Iranian against Wesley. So this was played on the 18th, 3 days back, and I don't know, I looked at this game and I thought it was a bit dull a few days ago. Sometimes I do find Iranian games a bit dull, but I looked at it again and actually I thought there was something interesting about it. So I'm going to try and bring that out. So C4 from level Iranian, English opening, knight F6, knight F3, G6, knight C3, D5, quick D5, C takes, knight takes. I know this is a bit dull positional opening. Knight takes, B takes, bishop G7. A bit of a rare move now, bishop E2. Let's carry on through this. Let's get to an interesting position. Queen A4. And you might think, what is this? What is this Queen A4? Actually, White's trying to put Black's queen side under greater scrutiny in horrible twisted ways like Queen A3. Strange manoeuvres, but the queen side is being put under greater scrutiny. Bishop D7, Queen A3. Pardon me. So if Black's ever going to play B6, he's weakening some light squares. It's pretty subtle stuff. Black is not keen to play B6. Black plays Queen A5, offering an exchange of queens. White can keep this tension, these queens staring at each other, with Rook D1. If Black wants to develop the bishop, that's fine. You know, White's got a small advantage at the moment. Rook B1, queenside scrutiny again. B6, finally weakening some light squares. And you might not think that's a major deal at the moment. D4, and now Black does take, so we've got automatic development as well. We've got pressure on that diagonal. Bishop G4, and it looks as though this is a classic Grunfeld. You know, D4 is under great fire here. We've got this, all on D4 here, like a Grunfeld. But White has got D takes C5 in this particular position. He's offering C3 though, so bishop takes C3. And the idea here, this is the first subtle move, it's not to give Black loads of counterplay on the A file. No, bishop A6 now threatens bishop B7, so that's quite nasty. Rook AB8, Rook DC1. And you notice, the loose pieces here are quite fascinating already. And White doesn't even mind the double pawns. The double pawns mean White has this rampant light square bishop, and Black is tempted to do this. Bishop takes F3, G takes. So we have this unbalanced position where White's got the bishop here now, and this rampant unchallenged light square bishop. But what can White do with this? The other thing about this already is this loose piece on C6 again as well. Almost a virtual skewer. So if the bishop did go back like this, then I think we just take here and we're on C6. So Black had to play this forcing move, bishop D2, Rook D1, and bishop goes back to C3. And now King G2. So what is Black doing here? And what is the point of King G2? I couldn't actually fathom the point of King G2, except it might be useful to protect F3 maybe with tempo. That was the only thing I could really think of. It's sort of safeguarding F3 in case knight E5. So anyway, so Black in this position seems to be in an uncomfortable state here. I think, well, in the game we see B takes C, bishop takes. It looks as though we've just improved this bishop. Bishop B4, bishop E3, staring at A7, bishop D6. This loose knight is poor loose knight is picked on here with Rook BC1, and it's actually this light square bishop controlling C8 makes the life of this knight quite unbearable here. This isn't ideal at all, and in fact it helps show why King G2 was really powerful as well, because in this position, if knight E5, we can just immediately kick the knight and probably play through with E5 probably. And this is embarrassing. Where is this bishop going? What about a7? You know, it starts to look a bit weird, this position. Badly gone wrong. So the knight actually goes to b4 here. And believe it or not, this knight is really being victimized in this position. You might not believe it. You might think, well, it's attacking things. After this bishop retreat, white now has horrible things going on here, starting with a3, because the knight would have to go back to c6, and then bishop takes f7 as an example. We'd pick up the knight, and it's not opposite colored bishops there. So a3 is quite a serious concern here. Black played rook fc8. So, you know, it's protecting the c6 square, so this doesn't work. You know, the knight can go back. f4 is played, as though there's an interest in e5, setting up a horrible, you know, tactic with bishop f7 to win the rook. So the king gets out of the way of this bishop f7 business with king f8. So black's still able to respond now with bishop c5. But what about the poor knight? The knight now is kicked with a3 to its only square, knight c6. And now the light square bishop is running rampant with bishop a6. The rook has to kind of, it looks as though the rook has to, if the rook goes here, it looks like big trouble. If the rook does this, we're going into this nasty pin, and you know, maybe just a move. I think just a4 here, and then bishop b5 is pretty nasty as an example. So black decided to play bishop takes a3, winning a pawn. So black is a pawn up. But these two pieces are now both being victimized in this position. Both of them are being victimized after rook c4. And you might think, why? Well, where is this rook moving? It can only go to c7 surely, or can it go to d8? Well, there is a loose piece here, so it goes to d8. But now rook a1 attacking the bishop, so we've got both pieces attacked. Bishop b2. And now look at this knight. 1, 2, 3. The rooks are stopping the knight going backwards. It hasn't got a5. In fact, the only square the knight would seem to have is b4 in this position. Out of all those squares, it seems b4 is the only one left for this poor knight on c6. So what do we want to do in this position as white? So white's play, what did Aronian play here? 20 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Any ideas? I've given you the clue, a major clue actually. Yeah. Yeah, we just want to take away b4. We play rook a4. It looks crazy, but you know, we're taking away b4 and we're still attacking the knight. So we're forcing black into contortions with rook d6 now. The knight can't go anywhere, it can only be protected. Do we really want to do this with black? Not really. e5 for rook on e6? This doesn't look healthy. The rook on e6 looks ridiculous. Now we start torturing this other poor piece. Where's this bishop going back? It hasn't got reverse gear either. Here. Rook c2. Where's this bishop going? Where? It's completely running out of squares as well. The rook is also controlling d4. we see black what is white actually, sorry, the last move though is actually threatening something, I think. Oh yes, I see. It's kind of threatening bishop c4 as well, by the way, to win that rook. That probably explains this next move, knight d8. It gives that that scope for the rook to b6, for example, but it does leave a7 behind. So bishop takes a7, and you know here these bishops are amazing. Actually, they're covering all these squares. And if rook b3, we've got bishop c4 actually, which is not very pleasant. So not very pleasant at all, this position. Rook a8, and now actually bishop b5, protecting the bishop. And now again asking this one, which is not protected anymore, you know, where are you going back? Where are you going? Not going anywhere. Bishop's trapped. So, you know, when I looked at this game the third time, I thought it was pretty sick actually. The first time I thought it was a bit boring. And then I looked at it later, I thought this game's quite naughty. All these pieces are kind of in trouble when white had the bishop pair. And I think that's why this game's worth checking out. You know, it's quite amazing how, you know, the pieces are kind of trapped. The bishop on b2 is trapped, isn't it? Trapped. First it was the knight, and that's stumbled to the back row. This rook's kind of also trapped. I mean, if it wasn't like trying to give itself, it's horrible how black's pieces came all trapped. So bishop takes e5, desperate to give back, to just take a pawn for the piece, desperate. And now elegantly defending the bishop. If the bishop had gone back, you know, maybe knights. No, there's not even knight c6. Maybe that's possible, but even better, just bishop e3 was played. So it's attacking there, and so there's sort of defending that indirectly, and that's the end of the game. So that wasn't a king's crushing game, that was a piece munching game. You see, yeah, the first two games I show they were king's crushing. This is piece munching. So it's a different style of play, but when you get into it, it's quite interesting how you know, these moves on the queen side kind of win material. I have got another game. Yeah, I have got another game to show you. So one last one. So Rapport playing against Dominguez. c4, c5, standard boring stuff so far. Knight c3, g6. But now here on move 3, this is totally out of most games now already. So Rapport is playing surprising stuff. He played g4. So usually g3. You know, g4. What is this? Okay, so g4, the problem with it is one of the problems with the Grob system in general. So it's sort of reminiscent of the Grob, Michael Basman, who, by the way, I've beaten Michael Basman once. No, I haven't. Sorry, tell a lie. Sorry, I beat him in Blitz. No, in a long game I've drawn with Michael Basman playing g4 on the first move. But here it's been delayed, this delayed Grob. I drew with Michael Basman at Black. Sorry, Congress. I think around the 1990s. But anyway, but one of the problems you might notice with the Grob, right, is if Black encourages this pawn to g5, then Black can sometimes grab this f5 square. So although it might seem exciting to play g4, sometimes it's got this downside. You get this fixed structure and Black can celebrate this f5 square. So bishop g7, bishop g2, knight c6, d3, d6, and you see under scrutiny already this g4. And if we play h3, maybe, you know, h5, I'm not, you know, But white just immediately plays g5 here. But this g5 does weaken these two squares. And it's this f5 square, it looks particularly painful after e6, that this knight is simply gonna play like this. h4, and now, you know, although h5 might be tempting, it's taken out of the equation, so h5. So we've got this fixed structure. The bishop's blocked in by its own pawn. So what's the idea? And now even more curious now, white plays bishop takes c6, just giving up this bishop voluntarily, doubling black's pawns. He seems to be playing in a crazy way. f4, so he's blocking in his bishop with the pawn now on f4 as well as g5. It looks strange, you might think. I think there's an idea to it. I think one idea, it's not so easy to use f5. I think we can just play e4 and it might not be easy to use the f5 square. So black actually plays e5. He's extending his bishop scope. F takes. Bishop takes e5. So this bishop g3 you'd think might be annoying. But I don't think it is particularly. And in fact, after knight f3, black didn't play bishop g3 check. I think bishop g3, I think all we do is king f1, king g2. And actually we might even use this f file later. Because if you look at this structure, this f file looks quite juicy. Black didn't play that. Black actually played bishop takes c3. So getting a symmetrical structure here. A symmetrically wrecked structure. But as I mentioned before, the problem with this is twofold. One, your bishop's slightly blocked in. But the other is the f5 square. And knight e7 just looks so juicy for this f5 square. Bishop f4, black castled. Also his king's quite safe, because white's not going to be able to open lines that easily. There's no easy way of opening lines here. Quite a cozy king. Knight d2. As though knight e4, now knight f6. So this is stopped. d5, stopping the use of knight e4. Queen a4. Bishop g4, and you know this is a backward pawn on a file black can use quite readily, and this looks really awkward now. You know, white cannot castle queenside. Bishop takes e2, why not? And then just munch here, why not? So we have this awkward looking rook h2, rook e8. I'm not sure white wants to castle queenside here because knight f5 looks quite juicy. The e3 square is under black's control. This looks like nasty stuff. We get actually rook b1, queen d7, rook f2, queen e6. Oh, Dominguez, really nasty tactician. When I say nasty, I mean brilliant. I mean, because now after this next move, knight b3, can you see what black played in this position? It looks as though c5's been attacked, and black should try and do something about that. But black to play, so what did black play in this position? So if I give you 20 seconds starting from now, what would you play as black? Any ideas? There's a very, very tactical move here. Very tactical. I could give you a clue, actually. I think I should give you a clue that there's a loose rook in this position. And there's a potentially loose bishop as well. These two are potentially quite loose. Black plays this shocker here. a real shocker. Yeah, bishop takes e2. And you know, the idea is if rook takes e2, I think we have queen g4. So we're actually threatening to win the rook, and we're threatening the bishop, and it's difficult to do something about that. And probably for that reason, White avoided that. White actually played king d2. And I think knight takes c5 doesn't change things, even though it's attacking the queen. I think queen g4 still, you know, this is still, you know, quite useful to win the rook. So White actually played king d2, and things get even more brutal now. Queen g4, still leaving c5 to be taken, and it is taken. But you know, we're on h4 now as well. Knight takes c5. And now queen takes h4. So if the rook, you know, takes here, we just take on f4. And if the king takes, then I think this is all over after knight f5 check. This is really nasty, because the king has to look after the rook. And if king f1, we've got, you know, queen h1 mate. So that can't be really taken. So bishop e3 is played. And now knight f5. I told you about that f5 square from the start. Look at that f5 square. You see, this is the whole problem. The f5 square with this g4, g5. And it's threatening to win material. It's horrible. You know, g5 as well is under fire. We can't really do anything here, it seems. Much. We see rook takes f5, g takes, g6, trying to open some lines against the king. But now black is first with the attack. So black to play in this position. So what would you play in this position if you were black? 20 seconds here, starting from now. You want to be quickest to open your opponent's king up, rather than your king being opened. Black is Domingue Perez 2754. White is, I think, Richard Rapport 2691. So black to play. What does black play here? Oh, black's quite quick with rook takes e3. He's just going to try and get this other rook into the attack for the moment. King takes e3, check. King d2. Now queen f2, so attacking the knight as well actually. Doesn't mind this check here. Check, taking the pawn. King takes. A temporary inconvenience. The queen's too far away from a7. We see rook b8, but now a very quick move from black to make the white king. Just bishop takes d3, check. So if king c1, there's queen c2 mate. And if on king takes d3, check, king d4, and white resigned with this move. I think queen e3 is just mate here. So white resigned actually with king d4. So anyway, it was interesting opening play from Rapport. I mean, got to give him credit for being creative. g4 is hardly ever seen in this position, g4. But it's amazing how you'd think maybe Domingue Perez would have been taken by surprise, but he seemed to play really quite appropriately to this surprise move. But then again, he is 2754, so I guess you could expect that. So anyway, these are the games from this week. I hope you enjoyed that, got something from that. So maybe see you next week, yeah? Okay, so have a good week. Thanks for coming. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much. Oh, remember please to like the video if you did like any of this. Cheers again.